Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Bridging Impact Podcast, the podcast that is passing wisdom to the next generation of athletes, coaches, and parents that transform leaders on and off the court. And in today's episode, we have a great one today with Professor Jennifer Gellock. She is the author of Half of Me, An Inward Journey Back Home to Wholeness. And in our conversation today, we talk about the athlete identity and how to go beyond it, how to make an impact as a coach while we're going through our own authentic journey to discover how we want to lead, and so much more. There's a lot of great wisdom packed into this episode. So without further ado, let's dive in. Welcome to the Bridging Impact Podcast, Jen. I'm thrilled to have you on today. You're the first person I'm interviewing in the new studio. As you can see, no wall art behind me, but I'm really grateful for your time today and the wisdom you're going to share with our audience. So welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I am also in a new studio. I'm living a nomadic lifestyle right now, so my studio is kind of changing week by week right now. So I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. Well, we may have to dive into that a little bit later on and how you lead your life from different spaces. But to begin our conversation, I would love to just dive in a little bit more about how have sports, because I know you're a three-sport athlete, and I know you've coached basketball at multiple different levels, as we'll get into, but how have sports in general made an impact on your life?
Yeah, I'm sure like most of the listeners, sports were my life, my whole life almost. I was lucky to be raised in a family that from a very early age put me into sports. And then from almost 3 or 4 on, that's what I did. I grew up playing volleyball, basketball, softball, soccer. I danced for 10 years. And when I got to high school, I moved into being a 3-sport athlete. So I stopped playing soccer, just focused on volleyball, basketball, and softball. And it was how I made friends. It was how my semi small town knew me, right? I was known as an athlete. I actually ended up graduating female athlete of my graduating class, but not because I was good. That's just where people knew me from, and from all my different sports. I always say that um, I wasn't the best one on the team on any team I was on, but if you asked me to play any sport, I'm probably the person that could probably grab a glove or a soccer ball and join in. And then it became a part of my life when I went to college, because I went from Massachusetts all the way to University of Tampa, and I had no idea how to make friends without playing sports. I quickly realized about it was October, November, my freshman year, and I'm just sitting in my dorm room. I'm like, what do people do if you're not playing sports, and how do you find your people? So I did the only thing I knew how, and I walked myself over to the athletic department, and I met the sports information director who's still there, gave me my first job, Tom Colby, and he introduced me to the women's basketball coach. And then from there on, I was the student assistant for the women's basketball program. I always say it was the best job on campus because I got to room with the girls, I got all the swag, I got to travel, but I didn't have to really work out unless I was invited to be on the scout team or I wanted to join a voluntary weightlift. So I enjoyed that. And we talked before we jumped on, but I really got to see things from the coaching perspective early on because I learned how to write a scout report, I learned how to break down film, and it led into my first job of coaching. And I worked in college athletics for 2 years after that at St. Leo University when I got my MBA in sport business. The head coach I was working for, she transitioned out, and I was just presented with an opportunity. Do I want to stay in coaching or do I want to make a shift? And I really loved working with the girls off the court. Like when they came into my office and they were like, I don't know what I want to do when I'm done, because at Division II, most of them weren't going to play at the next level. So I really liked having conversations about careers and their interests. And I kind of took a leap of faith and went to Central Michigan University and worked in student athlete services there. Really got interested in why a lot of athletes, even at a mid-major university, didn't know what they wanted to do when their college careers were over. Similar conversations I was having with the athletes at St. Leo. And I became really interested in athletic identity. So that's why I went back to get my PhD, and I studied things like athletic identity and athlete leadership. And yeah, I've really just stayed connected as an athlete my whole life. After playing competitive sports, I use sports to make friends. Every place I've moved to, because I moved to a lot of different places over the last 10 years, I've always joined a rec league as a free agent.
Yep.
And I've always made really good friends that way. So that's kind of my sport background. And most recently, I've been an assistant professor for 4 years in sport management. And I most recently am transitioning now. I just started a business called Inward Athlete that specifically focuses on helping athletes build their self awareness outside of just their athletic identity. Because that's where I really struggled from the beginning of my story that I just kind of told. I think I would have maybe transitioned out of athletics earlier on if I knew myself better. And it's been a really long journey to get here, and it's really what I'm passionate about helping others with.
I would love to. There's so much there that we can unpack, but I think where I really want to go with is so we just rebranded our basketball and leadership company to Beyond the Game Basketball. And you're talking about the off the court, kind of finding that career, finding that identity. So as a coach, I get the opportunity to work with like ninth and 10th graders are primarily who I'm serving, but I'm kind of, similar to you, a range of athletes from elementary to high school. And with that, what is your journey been like to working with athletes and helping them find purpose in career?
Mhm.
And how did that start connecting for you?
Yeah, so helping athletes find purpose and career stemmed from my own experience. I guess I call myself kind of a peer specialist now because I really had to hit rock bottom in my own identity, honestly, before I was able to help others. So in the summer of 2020, we know what happened in 2020. It was actually the first time during COVID that my body, I think, had to be still. From being a former athlete, using that same hustle and achievement mentality all the way through grad school, working in various roles of college athletics, when I had to kind of settle because there was nowhere to go, I had a lot of physiological reactions to that, and my nervous system was highly dysregulated. I actually ended up having a few panic attacks that I actually went to the emergency room a few times. I got all the workup done by a family physician, and they all just kind of came back with the quintessential story of burnout. Everything's fine. We think you're just having anxiety. And I was sitting there thinking that, I have self managed as a perfectionist anxiety my whole life. That's kind of what's been my driving force, in excelling. And I was just really getting at the root of it. And the root of it was so I started journaling to figure out what was wrong with me since people told me there was nothing wrong, but there was definitely something wrong. It was a high level of low self worth. And I realized most of my decisions, and even as an athlete, I was making them from a place of, I'm going to beat that scoreboard. I'm going to have the best stats. I'm going to publish the most papers, right? Once I got to grad school. And that was unmanageable because it wasn't coming from a place of high self worth or, drive within myself. So, my own stories have really inspired and now healing my nervous system completely through mindfulness, mostly from journaling, daily journaling practice, breath work, meditation. It has been infused in Inward Athlete to help people learn who they are from an inward place so that they can then take action, what I call inspired action, from a place of not having to measure yourself anymore or coming from a place of lack or low self worth.
Yeah, I would love to break that down. And for the coaches that are listening, the parents that are listening, on how they can help their athletes go inward, because I feel like it's even more challenging to go inward than ever just because of social media and the external notifications and instant gratification that are always at our thumbs. Like
Yeah.
we want these, certain accomplishments, recognition, likes, comments, and a lot
Yeah.
of our self-worth really comes from within. So can you break down a little bit more of how our parents, coaches, and other listeners
Yeah.
can help our athletes with that?
Yeah. So for the first thing I do is just bringing awareness to that we are more than athletes, right? Or we are more than any labels. For me, once it was no longer an athlete, it became student, it became I'm going to become the best professor. Like the label just changed, but it was the still same rooted mentality that I had as an athlete to be in competition. So I like to kind of just dissolve that first and foremost. Like we are more than just any label, even for our parents. Like you are even more than just a parent or a coach listening to this, and really helping to broaden that that marker of who we are through values and through a larger mission statement. And when I work with athletes and coaches and helping them identify their mission, I always say your mission should be large enough to walk with you into any room you go into. So, my mission, no matter if I'm with my family or I'm working with athletes or I am showing up because I'm a poet to do my poetry, like it's not one label, it's like the same mission. And my mission, I don't mind sharing it, is to shift others back home to their hearts. And I can do that in any setting that I'm in. So, I like to really broaden that version of ourselves because, like you said, we can get really into comparison with social media as well if I'm going to be the best this, the best that, the best whatever. But if we have a larger guidepost or North Star, we can really follow something that helps us to kind of deconstruct that comparison from a label standpoint.
Yeah, 1,000%. I love that, and as I'm hearing you talk, I'm like, how can I? One of the things like I'll share right now is I'm running camps, and actually tomorrow is the last day of camp, so it could be a really cool opportunity for this. I've been helping my athletes explore their values, but I
Yeah.
haven't helped them create like a mission statement. So for those that are listening and for honestly myself, how do we help our athletes create a mission statement that goes beyond just being a basketball player, being a student, being a son or a daughter?
Yeah. So I love to use, there's many different ways we can do this, right? Leaders out there are doing this many different ways. I have personally found, because I took every personality assessment, I took every strength finders assessment out there. And when I started doing inner work, I realized I had all the answers within myself. And that's why I love, love, love using what I call stream of conscious journaling, or it's also called automatic writing, that when we have enough time and space, say like you have 10 minutes, we'll work with your camp example. So say tomorrow you have the end of 10 minutes to get everyone with a notebook and a pen. You ask them a series of questions that really gets at the core of what they love to do when they're not even on the field or court. So I have a series of around like 10 to 15 questions that I usually pull from, and I'll give someone like 2 minutes to just write whatever. I call it a brain dump. Just write whatever comes to mind. And it is a 10-minute activity. And in this generation, it's so funny because they're not used to writing. So they're always like
Right,
doing hand
right.
exercises in the middle. So for example, a question would be, if when I'm fully rested and I had nothing on my schedule to do tomorrow, what would I do? If another question, if I showed up in service in my best self for others, what would that be and what would that look like? So it's really just broadening, asking really good questions to broaden, again, outside any labels, but to get at our values, which you mentioned. A lot of these questions, once you do the brain dump and you go through a series of 10 of them, there will be similar things that pop out, right? Like, I love to be in nature, or I love to be working with children or youth. Like, similar themes will begin to pop out, and that will help identify values. And then you just have to narrow it all the way down to try to find one sentence. And usually you do it over a series of days. Like, can we get to a paragraph first? And then can we get this to one sentence? And then I've even done it, well, let's get it to one word. For example, my one word is devotion. If I were to explain my mission, I'm devoted to whatever I show up to in that space. So it's kind of hard and abstract to explain this, I feel like, if you're just listening, but that's the activity that I love to bring through people through.
No, I understand exactly what you're saying, and as kind of what you're talking, I think my one word that I've been thinking about is development. I really love developing young people. Like
Mm,
mentor comes up as well, so it's hard to pick up one word. I have to
yeah,
kind of go through and do the exercises myself. But I think
I love that.
what I really would love to kind of focus on with my athletes is it's not just going to take a 10-minute conversation, but
Mm,
on the flip side, I know you said like sometimes their hands hurt, and I think one of the things that I've come to be challenged with when I do some of these leadership skill exercises is the athletes that write 3 or 4 words down, and it's not a total brain dump because they're so stuck because it can be challenging, right? I like if I've never been asked these questions, how am I going to know? And I see you nodding
yeah.
as like you've probably worked with those athletes before. So I'm curious how you continue to like ask I don't want to use the word pointed, but specific questions that help kind of athletes or whoever, right? It doesn't have to be an athlete, could be a student if it's a teacher listening, kind of come out with a certain answer.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it does take practice, right? To let our brains just daydream and flow, especially when we're so
Right.
used to staying really tight. So it really just is practice of like, here's 10 minutes and if nothing comes up, maybe that's the practice today, right?
Mm,
I also invite people to draw pictures. So maybe some people are
right.
visual people.
Right.
You can do what's called just like a cloud of just like letting like a mind map of drawing pictures and words and whatever's in your brain you can just try and if there's nothing in your brain, I always say that's the practice. The hard part for me is the people who they're not ready yet, you know. Some
Right.
people and some athletes and some coaches are just not going to be ready to do self-reflection because they either think it's not worth it. There's no benefit to it. And I'm not here or in the business of convincing anyone. So I kind of just let them have their moment. It does not offend me
Yeah.
if an athlete sits there and they just choose not to write. It's just who, where they're at in the moment.
That's a good point too. I think, you don't want to force them to like want to
Yeah.
you must reflect, because then they may have some sort of negative relationship with reflecting and they may never get to it
Yeah.
versus, in another year or two. And I've talked about this with my co-founder and coach is, we share like, some of this stuff that we're talking about, like values, this may go over their head now, especially at ninth grade, but
Yeah.
maybe, by the time that they're maybe choosing a college to go to, they will know, hey, I value, kind of being
Mm,
closer to a city or closer to my family, or maybe I value adventure and I want to go all the way across to the other side of the country or even a new country. So helping them discover that and just planting seeds is what I feel like is one
exactly.
of the best parts about coaching. So, can you continue to build on and share a little bit how you kind of layer things, right? Because self-awareness is like an onion. So can you share
Hmm.
any other like activities or questions you ask your athletes and even
Yeah.
ask yourself to
Mhm.
continue to peel back those layers?
Yeah. So specifically for athletes, I actually have like a 6 step kind of framework. So I'll just like lay that out and then you can ask me what part of that
Yeah.
you want to know more about. So the first one is like we're gonna honor and celebrate ourselves and understand that our careers are going to end at some point. We know in research that when athletes haven't acknowledged that their careers are going to end, and especially if they have a career ending injury, it can really impact their mental and emotional health. So we just even want to bring awareness and we want to start celebrating that as early as possible, what our bodies are doing, the process we're moving through. So to honor and celebrate ourselves as athletes, I don't think we do that enough, especially when we get to the end of a season and we just kind of say, here's the end of your banquet. Thank you, seniors, and goodbye. I think it's a very individualized process for someone to go through and like honor themselves and the work they put in. And then the second one brings to identity, and we kind of already unpacked that a bit, but broadening that identity outside any labels, specifically around being an athlete and how to use our values and mission to drive that. Um, Really understanding all the different lifestyle shifts that are going to take place when we're no longer athletes. I really like to help athletes reflect on. And again, earlier the better, even though they're in ninth grade, when we start talking about, okay, there's going to be a new way we have to make friends when we're not in season, or there's going to be a new way we eat and how our bodies change when we're no longer even in season, right? Compared to not in season. So getting athletes to think about their lifestyles, I really enjoy working with athletes, helping them understand their transferable skills. Uh, they have so many amazing skills from communication, teamwork, that we know employers love to hire for as well once you get out into your career. And it's really bringing awareness for athletes to all of those broad skills. And then, like, what uniquely do you bring to a team setting when you're an athlete? And how can you transfer them into other areas of your life? And then lastly, how to take inspired action and create those goals. I like to kind of use goals loosely in the sense, again, that can really set us up for, measuring ourselves if we don't hit a certain marker. But how do we actually take inspired action with the things that we care about, the things that we want to do? Because for myself personally, I was taking a lot of action my whole 20s, but a lot of it I was forcing myself to do all the action because as an athlete, I forced my body through many uncomfortable situations. But I love to do it. And now I'm finding the things I love to do, and I'm going to take inspired action from that place of, again, my mission devotion. Rather than, I'm not going to force myself to do anything that I'm not devoted to. So allowing what's kind of expired to fall, which is really hard when we love something, right? And to give ourselves permission when we're in a different season of life to allow things to shift and change. And that can be really hard psychology wise, just because psychologically, because our just humanness doesn't like change.
No, 100%. And I'd love to break that down even a little bit more because I know that's something that, I was challenged with. Like sports were my entire life. And I just honestly took a full break from sports. I was just like, I need a break, I need a breather. But I think as I became an adult, like I found myself coming back to
Mhm.
sports because that's where all my pivotal years of memories were. Of course, I had other off the court memories and off the court friends, but I like you, similar to you. I've been playing recreation sports to like meet friends here in a new city that I've moved in a couple of years ago, and it's like my easiest way of making friends. So making that transition, how do you work with certain athletes for maybe they're seniors that graduated, or even preparing athletes for beyond the game?
Yeah. So really I kind of apply that framework, but it is such an individualized process, right?
Right.
Like those are very broad things, but to get someone to understand that yes, everyone's going to go through this transition phase, but it looks differently for everyone. So just even allowing the compassion and self-compassion for that, it's not going to look like your neighbor or your teammate.
Right.
And it's all going to go through different your changes at different times. So having compassion for that first and foremost. Honestly, my biggest journey for working with athletes and working with myself and just in clients in general is that piece of self-love. I know it sounds cheesy, but it took me a really long time to love myself. So there's all these different parts of ourself. I'm an athlete, I'm committed, I'm creative, all of these things. And I had a hard time letting all of those things coexist at one time. And I think as athletes, when we transition, I really just invite athletes to like, can all of you exist? And what are all of these parts that are get to coexist in this next season of life together? So I have found just like treating an athlete like a regular human and letting them be human and allowing all these parts of themselves to coexist is what really helps with that transition, is like bringing back their humanity and their humanness and allowing them to go through the process of letting something go.
Right, recognizing that there's more to life than sports, right?
Yeah.
There's, and it's a process in terms of figuring out that transitional
Yeah.
period of what is next. And it's not a seamless transition, right? Like even moving to a new location, I'm sure you're going to experience that from being nomadic, right? You're in your hometown now, but you may move and shift to a place you've never been and have to meet new friends. So I think that's kind of a lot of things that sports teach us,
Yeah.
and that transition out of sports, and that it's challenging. It's not always, you kind of have to do the hard work of kind of self discovery. And so with self discovery, I feel like comes self leadership.
Hmm.
And I would love for you to share more about you have to take some self leadership and initiative and use your intuition to
Yeah.
then found inward athlete. So I'd love for you to share a little bit more about your story with how you started to kind of lead yourself and follow that intuition to founding inward athlete.
Wow. That's a great question. So on my journey, I think I kind of told you about, I started writing. I
Right.
started really kind of just reflecting, and it became just a daily practice to learn more about myself. And once I started writing, I was like, all these parts, there's these parts of myself, like being a creative, like really enjoying like intimate settings of people and being really personal with people rather than being in huge rooms of hundreds of people, which I found myself in. I was just allowing myself to like non-judgmentally just observe all these like things that like I didn't even know. And all of a sudden my journaling started turning into poetry. So I'm actually a poet. And I started writing poetry and it became very, very healing. It is also something I like to do with athletes. If there's any coaches out there who want to take an artistic approach to working with your athletes, because as a former athlete and as a I think this goes for both males and females who are former athletes. We can be in environments where we are told to just push through it or don't cry, like rub it off. And actually, I'm a highly sensitive and emotional being. Like, that's just who I am. And I stopped learning how to feel, honestly, because I just pushed through things. Poetry really opened the door for me to pinpoint emotions I was having, and it's like it's actually a healing type of tool, a mindfulness tool, because you feel an emotion, you get to like, wow, I'm like really afraid of XYZ, right? So I'm going to go write about it. And what it does is it brings logic to the other side of the brain and actually starts bridging new neural pathways for us to like feel, process it, and then like move the emotion through us. So I began Inward Athlete because I had really started healing myself through poetry, and I was starting to research why it was. And a lot of it was through mindfulness and really starting to feel and process the emotions like grief. I have moved around a lot and I have changed a lot of different identities. In my first book, I just published my first book in June, and in that book, it says one day I'll write a whole story about the grief one goes through when dying to an old self so that they can become a new self. And there was a lot of grief there that had gone unprocessed through many of my lifestyle changes and shifts. And most recently, yeah, I just left academia to go become an entrepreneur full time. And I think it really is only because I found a very poetry to move me through it, to process, become self aware enough that academia and teaching in a traditional classroom just wasn't what I wanted to do anymore. It wasn't aligned with my values, it wasn't aligned with a lot of things about the culture in higher education right now. So I had to make a really hard decision and shift. And writing and poetry has been the way forward for me. And so I kind of embed some of those practices into Inward Athlete and some of the practices that I do. I think I answered your question.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's beautiful. That's really beautiful, and I appreciate you for sharing and being vulnerable, in that regard. And I share similar aspirations, right? Like I've had thoughts in my mind about, oh, I can, and I don't want to sound like diminishing the role of a teacher because this is so essential and we don't have enough, but like that's just something that's not calling me. I actually have my journal right here. Like I journal every
Mm,
single, actually I switched it to the mornings. Like I was evenings, mornings. I try and shift up the routine, but
yeah.
that's later on. And I know that being an entrepreneur and being like providing a basketball and leadership program is something that is really important to me because I'll share similar to you my most of my like growth and development and during my youth years. And this is not a knock on my teachers or anything, but I just learned life through sports and I want to teach life through sports. And it sounds like
Mm,
it's a similar aspect for you. You relate to the identity of the athlete, but not necessarily on the court but off the court, and really helping them figure out who they are as people beyond the athlete, which is
yeah.
what's most important, like who they are as actual
Yeah.
people. And so I think that's just something that we kind of skim over, right? And it's so essential for our society to recognize and value people for who they are, which is just their own personal selves, and develop their own self-awareness.
Mm, beautiful. Give you some poet snaps for that. Wrapping that up beautifully. Yes.
Poet snaps. I know. I may have to start writing poetry. Actually, I coached at a clinic the other day, and one of the coaches, he's been coaching for a long time. He actually has trained Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant. And one of the things that he's a poet. Actually, he was teaching the kids what a haiku is, and like there are
Yeah.
some kids that are really young, so it's really fun to see. It's really powerful to see what words kind of come to action. And so
Yeah.
I know we touched a little bit on upon reflection and helping our athletes reflect, but when it comes to coaching and mentorship, what do you think stands out to you from either your coaches or mentors that you've had that are really essential and important for all athletes to have in a coach or a mentor?
Yeah. So I don't believe we can really ask athletes to do the inner work or this reflection that we just spent the last half hour talking about unless
Yeah.
we're willing to do it ourselves.
Mm.
And the athletes are they're smart, right? Like
Yeah, they
young,
do.
like
Yeah, they are.
kids are smart. I don't care what age. We lose that at some point because we're told not to listen to our like intuition. But before we lose that, um, if you're not doing the inner work or self-reflection and leading with integrity or your values and your mission, your athletes are going to know. So I would say first and foremost, start with you. And then from an athlete's perspective, um, yeah, find the coaches and the mentors who are doing the work, right? And that you feel like you can trust. I know from the people that I worked with when I was learning from them and I saw them showing up powerfully and in their authenticity and the things that were true to them, it just allowed permission slips for me to do the same thing. So I think that's really important as well.
Yeah, that's number one, right? Like I think I try and share that. I try and share as much as I can about my mistakes to my athletes all the time
Mm,
because I think sometimes what I have noticed in other coaches is that they can come off as like I am the answer key, right? I have all the
mm,
right answers. I never make the mistake, right? I'm 100% on the Scantron, however you want to break it down. But I always admit, like, hey, I'm like today, we'll talk about today was communication was our value. And we were talking about body language. And I shared with them, like, one thing I'm working on is when an athlete makes a mistake or repeated mistakes, for me to still have good positive body language that's constructive. I'm
yeah.
giving feedback. I'm not just going to let it go, but I'm not going to roll my eyes, put my head down, and show athletes that I don't trust in them.
Yeah.
So if I'm able to do that, maybe an athlete will be able to meet me halfway on certain aspects. So I think
Yeah.
that is really important. From some of the coaches that you kind of going back to that, what were some of the most important lessons that you learned from them,
Mm,
that you have taken away into your practice now? Because we talk about how we learn in sports, and now taking it into your life as
yeah.
an entrepreneur.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest lessons I've learned from great leaders is that, and especially great coaches that I can just think of one that comes to mind. She was the head coach at St. Leo when I was there, Nikki Jesse. One thing that she was really great at was she was a visionary. I think really great coaches like have this vision and they're able to build that culture around that vision. Um, in terms of she did some really cool activities. This is just an example of something we did, but she spoke to this future team, right? That we were going to be at the end of the season a lot and really held that vision for people to step into. And I can just think of one activity I remember we did at the beginning of the season where we got the ladder out. The gym was dim. I think it was like a six, instead of doing 6 a.m. sprints that day, she set up the ladder right under the net, and each girl walked up the ladder to cut a piece of the net down. And she's like, at the end of the season, like, this will be us. Like, I don't want you to practice now. So just like really creative way ideas to like experientially put your body and your mind. And I'm a huge believer that of the mind body connection, and that's why meditation, right? That's why the greats like Kobe Bryant, like he meditated, LeBron James, because they feel it in their body how they're going to perform that night and they visualize it and then they go out and do it. So the power of visualization and vision holding for that future self or that future performance has been something that it took me a long time to learn, honestly. It's almost in retrospect that I had to be like, this is what these people were doing and this is why they were like really good at what they were able to pull a whole group of people through, and individual athletes, like allowing you to hold a vision of their highest potential for them. And that's what I do one-on-one coaching right now for mostly entrepreneurs and people moving through life transitions, especially in my niche population is athletes. But really, if you're a good coach, you're vision holding for someone in their fullest potential and you're asking them really good questions to lead them to their own knowing. So yeah, I think vision holding is key here.
Yeah, no, that definitely sounds key. And that's something I've been trying to speak into is like I always try and talk to my athletes like this is not where you are. Where you are now is not where you're going to end up.
Yeah.
Right. And kind of painting that picture. And I have plans of having conversations with we have tryouts here in a couple weeks. So everyone who gets the opportunity to make the team, 3 things you do well, 3 things to improve on if you want more play time. That way they can have an idea, right? And just trying to make things as crystal clear as possible. So there's
Exactly.
limit that gray area. There's always going to be some gray area because we're humans, we're not robots. But I want to dive into kind of the vision
Mm-hmm.
meditation and just like imagining, right? How do we help our athletes envision themselves being
Mm.
successful? Do you do it like before a practice or before a game? And is it me talking, or do I find a YouTube video? Like what practices
Oh,
have you seen be
yeah.
effective?
So, um, I think you need to have time and space just for the experience to happen. I haven't really dug too much into the research of the best time. I think you just need to have the time and space to like drop into that experience. So I think it can be at any time. And you want it to feel real, like you want to be able to resonate with whatever voice. So I know people who they do silent meditations and they can just like go through a mental rehearsal. And that's like a performance training as well, right? Mental performance training. Um, there's also ones that I know that some athletes record themselves. I've done this for myself. I've recorded myself vision holding for my future, and speaking of like how I want to be living, but like in my future tense, and like how I would show up if I was like highest self. And I listen to that on repeat. And then I have through Inward Athlete called Inward Audio Journeys, where it's a meditation, but they're specifically customized for athletes outside of just athletic performance, but to really step into that fullest expression of who they are outside of just being an athlete. And I can maybe send that to you. You can put it. There's a free one that's on my blog for Inward Athlete. You can maybe drop it in the notes
Love
for
to.
the podcast. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that okay, that's great. So I will definitely drop that in the show notes. And speaking of that, as we kind of are enter the fourth quarter, last 2 minutes of our conversation, you've dropped a lot of wisdom for us, and I'm definitely going to make sure that you get to plug your book and your resources and how people can potentially connect with you. But what would your last piece of advice be? Like, if there was, if I like asking this question.
Mhm.
If I was your athlete working with you, what would you want me to remember in 10 years?
Ooh, yeah. In 10 years from now, it's so funny because I just wrote something about this today about what would I have
Perfect.
told myself 10 years ago. It would be that to like open up like the field of like what you're like, sometimes we like narrow in our field, but open it up to be like, what are all the things I love to do? What things make me feel the best? And can I allow myself to do more of those things and to be willing to let go of the old when they're expired? This even goes for you like with your athletic experience to like really know when it's time to let it go. Um, and that might be before your parents or your coaches are ready. And it might be something you want to hold on to when you're going, you want to try for the pros, right? Or the next level in college. But yeah, to expand all the things that you do love to do outside even just your athletic role. And that could be cooking, that could be dancing and singing and all the things. But allow yourself to do more of the things that you love to do.
That's huge. And I actually think there is a correlation between having other outside hobbies and activities to also athletic success, even when you're in the moment before you expire. Or like if you, talk to a bunch of athletes, like a lot of athletes, they like to, like for baseball players, they're into like fishing because I'm an A's
Mhm.
fan. So I listen to podcasts and they're into fishing. So that's what they do on their off days. Or there's a lot of golfers, right? A lot of golfers for basketball players, Michael Jordan, everyone knows, right? So
Yeah,
having that some sort of outlet and maybe it's baking, right? Hanging out with friends, family, whatever it may be, like eating, trying new different foods. But I think expanding that identity is so important. And I really
exactly.
appreciate you sharing so much wisdom around it. So, can you share more information on your book, where people can find your book, where people can find and connect with you?
Yeah, so my first book is came out in June. It's called Half of Me: An Inward Journey Back Home to Wholeness. And it's a thematic memoir. It houses my first collection of poetry and it tells some short stories. But basically, how I use poetry and the poems are in there are the poems that I use to move from self acceptance or becoming self-aware, self-accepting myself and moving through this process of like self-actualization and becoming the fullest expression of who I am and want to be. And I have a business called Inward Athlete, which is interesting because I'm not actively working on Inward Athlete. There's a little bit of a pin on it. We didn't talk much about it today, but I'm a deeply spiritual person, and I have just been really praying about what I'm meant to be doing on this nomadic journey, and it is going around and sharing my book. So I'm building Inward Athlete when I have the time, but I'm really focusing on sharing my journey through poetry and writing right now. But I am talking to athletes about it as well, so that's been fun. And you can buy it anywhere that you buy books. So like Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or even your local bookstores can find that for you. And I am traveling, so if you're listening to this and you want to find out where I'm at, you can follow me on LinkedIn and Instagram. And I write a weekly Substack post where I enjoy putting just a self-reflection about this crazy journey that I'm on.
Perfect. Well, we will link below where they can connect with you, Instagram, LinkedIn, subscribe to the newsletter on Substack. Jen, I really appreciate your time today. I have a full page of notes, and a lot of, this wisdom that you share with me will be great for me to take home back to my athletes to, share with them the wisdom that helps them go beyond the game, right? Because like you said, there's an expiration date on everyone's athletic journey. So thank you so much.
Great. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Bridging Impact Podcast. We'd love it if you would like, subscribe, leave a comment and a review on whatever platform you're on. It's the best way to help us grow. We appreciate you for doing that. We'll shout you out on social media. I'd also love if you connected with me on social media. Let me know your thoughts, and this is why I do it. I want to share knowledge and wisdom from experienced leaders to people like yourself and myself, so we can have this dialogue and move forward, make an impact on the world. So stay tuned, stay subscribed. Cheers.